Many companies, however, simply ignored the law. They continued planting spies among pro-union workers, tapping union phones, and intimidating or firing union sympathizers. But they couldn't stop the workers from organizing. By 1936, John L. Lewis and the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO, had forged an industrial union movement in the mass production industries. The United Auto Workers was organized by the members of previously competing unions. They quickly put management on the defensive with a new tactic, the sit-down strike. By sitting down inside the factory and refusing to leave, workers forced employers to bargain with them over wages, union recognition, and improved working conditions. Neither police, nor strikebreakers, nor bad weather could stop the sit-downers.
When the speed up comes, don't twiddle your thumbs. Sit down, sit down. When you want 'em to know, they'd better go slow. Sit down, sit down. Sit down, just take a seat. Sit down and rest your feet. Sit down, you got 'em beat. Sit down, sit down.
In December 1936, after a series of brief sit-downs in Detroit, UAW members in Flint, Michigan, and other cities sat down inside General Motors plants, refusing to budge until the company recognized their union. The 44-day occupation in Flint ended with an historic agreement. GM, the world's largest corporation, recognized the UAW. With this stunning victory, sit-down fever spread all across the country, peaking in Detroit. In the 10 weeks following the victory at GM, some 35,000 AFL and UAW members sat down. Workers occupied 9 Chrysler plants, Newton Meatpacking, and Farmcrest bakeries. Employees in over 100 factories, offices, and other workplaces joined sit-down strikes for economic justice. Women's auxiliaries and the Detroit Women's Emergency Brigade aided in the sit-downs. They picketed in front of occupied factories. Thousands of underpaid women workers sat down, occupying 6 cigar factories, hotels, laundries, Woolworths, and other department stores.
There once was a union maid who never was afraid of the goons and the ginks and the company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the union hall when a meeting it was called, and when those Legion boys came round, she always stood her ground. Well, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Well, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die.
The sit-downs did not go unanswered. In some cases, employers and police forcibly evicted sit-down strikers at a number of small factories. But by demonstrating their collective strength at this Cadillac Square rally, Detroit workers discouraged police crackdowns and protected their right to strike. Stanley Novak was an organizer during the sit-downs.
For the first time in memory, all the ethnic groups joined in mass display of support for the strikers. This community support was the decisive factor in winning the strikes and establishing the union.
The union is behind us, we shall not be moved. The union is behind us, and we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, we shall not be moved.
The sit-downs transformed Detroit and the nation. In spite of the tremendous upheaval, not one life was lost. With collective bargaining rights now more firmly secured, the union's reliance on sit-downs diminished, and the courts outlawed the tactic 2 years later. Unions grew. In Detroit, the UAW-CIO won recognition for over 100,000 workers in automotive parts and assembly plants, while the AFL organized thousands of new members and chartered 16 new locals. Over the next 4 years, the AFL and the CIO organized to protect and sustain gains made during the sit-downs. They organized the city's teamsters, rubber and steel workers. newspaper workers, department store and government employees. Yet, the Ford Motor Company remained unorganized. Sheldon Taps recalls that fear was a major weapon used against workers.
When I was marching in the Labor Day parade, I had my Ford badge pinned on my lapel, and as I got to the Fox Theater, a man stepped out from the curb and took a good look at my badge, as though he wanted to remember the numbers on it. And I guess he did remember them pretty well, because the next day I found myself fired.
The climate of fear was especially strong at the giant Ford Rouge plant in Dearborn. In May 1937, Union leafleters were attacked by the Ford Service Department at the Rouge plant. Dozens of UAW members, including leaders Walter Reuther and Richard Frankenstein, were injured. The UAW's campaign at Ford lasted 4 years. It spoke to the special concerns of black workers as well as those of white workers. A Negro organizing committee formed to speak to the large numbers of black workers at Ford's. By April 1941, the union had won the support of the majority of Ford workers. When the company fired 8 union supporters for wearing UAW buttons, virtually all of the Rouge plant's 80,000 workers walked out, including most of the 12,000 black workers employed in the sprawling complex. The company kept about 2,000 newly recruited men, mostly black workers, inside the plant as strikebreakers. Under the direction of the Ford Service Department, they were frequently sent out to attack UAW picketers. The violence pitted black against white. But black community leaders like John Conyers Sr., Reverend Charles Hill, Horace Sheffield, and Charles Diggs Sr. intervened on behalf of the UAW. By encouraging these few holdouts to join the strike, they helped prevent a violent racial confrontation. Ford was forced to agree to a vote on union representation, and in May 1941, the UAW-CIO won an overwhelming victory with 70% of the votes cast. By the end of 1941, Detroit was firmly established as a union town. Former UAW Regional Director George Morelli remembers how much that meant.
The most important thing was that we gained recognition of the fact that we were human beings and not a nameless number. It gave us tremendous lift to realize we were no longer, "Hey you," but "Mister."
For Detroit workers, the union came to mean many things. Better wages, job security, decent pensions, paid vacations, health insurance, improved safety standards, grievance procedures, and more. But the struggle for a better life didn't end there. The modern civil rights movement, struggles to upgrade blacks in industry and housing, can be traced to the early organizing years. And new groups of workers sought to organize. The late UAW president, Walter Reuther.
There are the teachers in America to be organized, and thousands of white-collared workers in the offices, in the distribution trade. And I say the great challenge, the opportunity is here. And the challenge is there the wisdom? Is there the capacity to lead? I say it can be done.
And indeed, drives were launched to win collective bargaining rights for public sector workers by unions like the Federation of Teachers, AFSCME, and the service employees. A strong foundation had been laid. The gains achieved by workers, the great strides towards social justice, find their roots in the success of this union town's organizing years. Teachers Union activist Mary Kaystead.
I feel that most of this generation is unaware as to how our industrial society evolved. I think as people see these landmarks on a tour, they will get a sense of the hopes and aspirations of the thousands of people who dedicated themselves to a better way of life.
In our hands is placed the power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever, solidarity forever, solidarity forever, for for the Union makes us strong. Once was a Union maid who never was afraid of the goons and the ginks and the company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the Union Hall when a meeting it was called, and when those Legion boys came round, she always stood her ground. Well, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union. Well, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. I'm sticking to the Union till the day I die.